I'm Samir Nur Mohammed, a professor of management at Wharton. And I'm joined here today by Reggie Love, former special assistant to President Barack Obama. Reggie's here to talk about his new book, Power Forward, My Presidential Education. Reggie, welcome back to Wharton. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Samir, thank you for having me. I appreciate you bringing me on today.
I heard about your book a few weeks ago when it was featured in USA Today. And after reading the book, I just came away thinking that you're such a sponge, whether you're around Coach K, who's like the most winningest coach in college basketball history, or President Barack Obama, or any other leader. You just seem to suck up knowledge and reflect on your experiences. Where did that ability come from?
That's a great question. I always say that I was a younger brother growing up, and so my brother Richard, he's 4 years older than me, and the thing that I always learned that if I didn't want to get a spanking or if I didn't want to get grounded, it's like do the things that he didn't do. And so that's really where it started. But I mean, look, I think I just was fortunate enough to have spent so much time with two guys who took the time to mentor me. In so many scenarios, you can work with people that aren't necessarily as invested in the development of the people that are around them, and I was lucky enough in which, I think Coach K is the epitome of what collegiate athletics should represent, and how he grows young men into men, into productive members of the community, whether or not that's basketball players or analysts or lawyers or hedge fund managers. If you look at the pedigree of professions of people who've come from Coach K's tutelage, it's pretty impressive, and the president as well. I think that's something that's really an amazing attribute that he has. I think that sometimes you work for guys in politics and they try to figure out how to convince their staff to stay as long as possible. But in the scenario working for him, even when I left, I think he, even said to me, look, I think you're going to go on to do great things, and any support that I can give you in your development, I'm there for you. So I'm just lucky that people have been willing to put inputs and mentorship into me versus vice versa.
Yeah, so one thing that really stood out in the book too was your decision to go work for the then Senator Barack Obama before he became the national icon that he is, of course, today. When we think about our students here at Wharton especially, we think about a lot of them, they have these really established paths in front of them, and it really stood out to me that you kind of chose this more unconventional route. Did you ever doubt that decision? And if you ever did, what did you kind of say to yourself to ensure that you were on the right path and you really believed in it?
Yeah, there's a couple funny sayings. I think the first one is, my college football coach used to tell me this: is look, you're gonna make the wrong play often, but if you make the wrong play full speed, that's better than making the right play going 50%. And I think that's like a very telling element, because we spend so much time trying to get everything exactly right. It's like, I want every piece of data that I can get before I decide to make a decision, and until I get all of those data sets out there, I'm not going to take a decision. And so, it's like the running back who runs into the wrong hole. If he's running full speed, even if it's the wrong hole, sometimes he pops out. But if he's running in the right hole and he's running half speed, he gets like a concussion. So look, when I made the decision to go work for then Senator Obama, there were a couple of things that were going on for me. One, I kind of said to myself, look, I'm 23. Hopefully my runway is relatively long. If I make the wrong decision today, I've got a lot more time in order to recorrect that wrong decision, versus doing something that's a little less risky or has less downside for a significant amount of time, in which you come out of it and you haven't had a bad experience, but you haven't you haven't gotten away from sort of the mean. So I think when you're young, I think you got to have a healthy appetite for risk. I don't think that I don't think it was a huge risk in the sense of, I think my decisions were between going to work at Goldman Sachs and going to go work for a guy whose no one name they could pronounce, and I really thought that both jobs were going to be a win for me because, either I would go to finance and learn and, have an opportunity to have a great earning potential, or I would go work for someone that I really admired and respected and someone who I thought that I could grow and learn from as well. But the other piece of it too is that I did feel a little. I wasn't 100% sure that I was ready to stop playing sports. I'd spent a lot of time like playing football. I kind of thought I would always be like a professional athlete. That was sort of, that was like I thought that was the end zone for me. And when that didn't happen, or when I realized that that wasn't necessarily the best use of my time, I was sad about it, and I wasn't like super, super happy that I'd been training and playing for, a decade and a half and that it was going to come to an end. But, I think it was definitely, it was definitely the right decision.
I want to touch on the subject of race because it's something that comes up in the book. And, your book revealed that there were those in the African American community that were some of Obama's harshest critics, especially early on in the campaign. You said something that they saw him as not black enough.
Yeah.
And it really struck me. And to you, what does not black enough mean for those climbing the corporate ladder today? And what kind of information did you get from the president that our, people in the African American community here at Wharton or even other minorities can use to kind of think about that experience and kind of figure out how to travail some of those challenges that they face?
Yeah, I mean, that's like I write that chapter, and it's like, it says all layups aren't easy. And that is the example I use mainly because the premise behind it is that, you don't want to take the thing that's in front of you that's for granted, right? But as a culture and as a society, look, I think race is something that's still very, very prevalent, and I think it varies from, from politics to corporate settings to sports to growing up as as me as a young African American in the South. I think it's something that it's a delicate issue. The biggest things that I always say is that as an African American, I feel like I have more opportunity today than my parents and grandparents ever had. Did I ever feel like I had every single opportunity available to me? No, not so much. And and I think the biggest thing that I try to do, which may be wrong or may be right, is that I try to spend less time focusing on the things that I don't have and more time focusing on the opportunities and things that are in front of me. And sometimes that's like hard to do because, I remember growing up, I went to a small private school, Providence Day. And I remember then, like, the tuition was like, it was like $16,000 a year. And I was like, who can afford this? My parents, like, were very middle class, and they didn't have a Lexus or a Mercedes or a big house or any of those things. And it would have been very easy for me to say, look, this isn't fair, or, I want what they have, or, but I think that at the same time, there were like people who lived in the neighborhood that I lived in that had half of what we had. So it's, when you look at race as a whole, and I think, race, and you can go for race and can be substituted with gender, with sexuality, with, socioeconomics. I don't think that there's like a silver bullet or there's no cure-all for the different ways that we're viewed. I think we just, as a culture and a community, we need to have open hearts and open minds as we continue to grow, that, everyone out there has a story to be told, has value to be added to whether or not it's a business or to the creative process, to a university, to an organization. And if we continue to try to do that, I think we grow as a country.
So what's one lesson that you want our students and alumni to take away from your book and your experiences?
I think the biggest lesson out there that I write about is so when I played at Duke, I was I was a utility player. Everyone thinks that I was like the star because I was a captain for the Duke basketball team. I was a captain as a senior, but when I was a freshman, I was a walk-on. I never thought I was going to get on the court, and there is value to be had in the small things. Every scenario that you're in is not going to always be exactly how you envision it or exactly what you want it to be. When I played at Duke, I would have much rather been like J.J. Redick or Shane Battier and like National Player of the Year and leading scorer, but I never was. But I feel like I got just as much value as having been a role player there as the guys who were superstars. And the same way when I worked on the campaign and in the White House, I was never like a chief of staff or legislative director, but I feel like I learned just as much and had just as a significant experience for me personally to have been there just as a personal aide and not the guy who's like writing the legislation or deciding who's going to go in to kill bin Laden or any of those things. So, I think sometimes, there's a lot of value to be had in things that don't necessarily seem as sexy and as cool as you may want them to be.